The train car was nearly empty. She chose a seat far away from everyone, sat down on the bench, and pondered something of her own. Every day, Monica returned from work on the train. It was already dark outside. In these parts, the sun sets early in October. Few people traveled to the far station where the girl got off. People dispersed along the way. Some got off, some got on. Today was payday. She mentally divided the money in her head, some for food, some for rent, and most importantly, for her grandfather's medicine. All her thoughts were only about him. Her grandfather was the only family she had left. He raised and cared for Monica alone. Her mother died young when the girl was 2 years old. Her father quickly remarried, so she gained a stepmother. This woman immediately settled into the house, behaved arrogantly and confidently. Apparently, the father thought everything would be different. He longed for love, care, and affection, like in his previous family, but instead, he got this shrew in the house. The neighbors gave her this nickname, seeing the woman's assertive nature. She was the type to lead with force. The father was soft and easily influenced by nature. He thought the main thing was that Monica now had a mother who cared for her and looked after her. But the child, like himself, needed tenderness, kindness, and love, none of which the shrew could provide. So a couple of years passed, but no emotional warmth ever settled in the orphaned souls. The father gradually started to lean towards the bottle, out of despair and hopelessness, it seemed. The house seemed to have everything for happiness: beautiful furniture, crystal, carpets. What else was needed, so thought the shrew. Seeing her husband drinking, and all the responsibilities of another child falling on her shoulders, she decided to change the situation radically. She didn't have any children of her own, nor did she have a great desire to have them, so a plan matured in her mind. She needed to give the child to her grandparents, the parents of Monica's mother. They longed for their granddaughter, missed her, so she would be better off there. So she began to subtly manipulate her husband, very carefully working on him. Since he was weak-willed and dependent, she eventually persuaded him. It took some time, and by that time, Monica's grandmother had passed away. But the shrew was not accustomed to backing down, so the girl was taken to the village to her grandfather. Monica hugged her plush teddy bear with one sock down, a bow untied, and a small suitcase in hand. She stood on the threshold of her grandfather's house. The father explained to the old man for a long time and incoherently why it would be better for Monica to live with him now. But this is, of course, temporary, the man asserted. We'll take her back soon. And the grandfather was so happy and joyful, he hugged his only blood relative for a long time, tears streaming down his cheeks. He adjusted the sock on his granddaughter, tied a bow on her head, and said, "Well, Monica, let's live together, happily and cheerfully." He really missed his daughter after her death, and the departure of his beloved wife undermined him even more. That's why his granddaughter was the only motivation for him, the reason worth living. Two loving hearts started living together, the old and the young. The grandfather loved his granddaughter immensely, spoiled her, and never refused her anything. But at the same time, he was strict and could punish her for mischief. Their favorite pastime was fishing. They loved sitting by the river with their fishing rods, catching fish. One day they went fishing by the river. In the first 5 minutes, Grandpa caught 4 small carp. Monica didn't lag behind, she already had a couple of carp in her bucket. Suddenly, some whimpering was heard from the opposite bank. A puppy was whimpering, but it couldn't be seen in the reeds along the shore. The whole bank was overgrown with reeds, and above it was a gentle slope. Monica noticed how a black ball rolled down from the cliff and disappeared into the tall grass. Only his hoarse voice echoed throughout the area. He walked through the grass and yelled so loudly that he became completely hoarse. "Grandpa, Grandpa, there's a puppy, it's crying, it probably lost its mom," the girl said. "Grandpa, swim, get me the puppy, it's so unhappy," she begged. Grandpa was ready to do anything for his granddaughter, and he also felt sorry for the little animal. He was already prepared to swim across to the opposite bank, but the puppy decided everything on its own. It squeezed through the reeds, splashed into the water, and swam towards them. Monica felt like she couldn't breathe while he was swimming. The water was icy, the width of the river was small, only about 5 meters. Well, at least the current was almost imperceptible. She was very afraid that he wouldn't make it, but he swam ashore and even climbed out on his own. Wet and skinny, shivering from the cold. "Grandpa, I won't abandon him now. I'll take him home. He swam to me by himself," Monica said confidently. The girl didn't let go of the puppy's hands until they reached home. She carried him around all day. They began to examine the little one at home. Grandpa, a connoisseur of wild animals, told his granddaughter that it was not a dog at all but a mix of a dog and a wolf. And the black color, apparently, came from the mother. They named him Russell. Monica's happiness knew no bounds. She had wanted a dog for a long time and asked her grandfather for a puppy, and here was a whole wolf, practically tame, and he even chose her himself. Russell began to grow not by days, but by hours, and he grew into a handsome young wolf. He wasn't very large in size, apparently influenced by the dog genes, but he was strong and brave, like a real wolf. A year later, news came that Monica's father had died. Alcohol eventually got to him, or maybe the shrew had a hand in it, or most likely both. That's when the stepmother got busy. They needed to arrange the inheritance. After all, half belonged to Monica. So, if she could get guardianship over the girl, she could take the remaining part for herself. And let her live with her grandfather, reasoned the enterprising lady. The girl needed to be shown to the guardianship authorities, and the shrew launched an attack on the grandfather. With fairy tales and caresses, she assured the old man that everything would be fair and decent, that she would arrange guardianship over the girl so that she wouldn't be sent to an orphanage. But everything would remain the same, Monica would live with him, and she, the shrew, would help them in everything. But the grandfather drove the fraudster out of the yard. He knew perfectly well what she really wanted. Then the shrew decided to take a different path and applied a cunning tactic. What was in the head of the bad woman, no one knows, and what guided her in her actions. But it certainly wasn't common sense. She decided to secretly take the girl to the city. All the guardianship documents were already prepared. The only thing left was to sneakily steal the girl away from her grandfather. And the cunning woman succeeded. During the afternoon nap, when the old man went to the local store for groceries, she picked up the sleeping child and hurried through the gardens into the forest. All she needed to do was to get the girl to the car, which the villain had parked behind a small strip of woods to avoid detection in the village. She had barely disappeared into the forest when Russell caught up with her. He had been accompanying his owner to the store when suddenly, he bolted with the speed of a bullet towards the woods. At first, the old man didn't understand anything, but then he realized that something bad had happened. When he finally reached the forest, he saw a scene that shook him to the core. He didn't know whether to be upset or laugh. The troublemaker was lying face down on the ground. Russell had torn the wig off her and was mercilessly tearing it apart with his teeth, sending pieces flying in all directions. The jacket on the angry woman was torn, the sleeve and collar were torn off, and there was a huge hole the size of a large apple in the soft spot area of her pants. Her face was covered in dirt, bits of leaves, needles, and moss hung from her wet hair. She was screaming loudly and shaking her fists in the air, as if threatening everyone around. The old man took the keys to her car from the ignition lock and hid them in his pocket. "I won't file a police report against you for kidnapping the child," said the grandfather to her. "But you will go to the station as you are now, with a dirty face and a bare bottom. Russell will escort you. And don't you dare show up in our lives again." They never saw the troublemaker again. The grandfather took guardianship of the girl, as he was only 60 years old at the time. When Monica grew up, she received her share of the inheritance. The train stopped, and the girl stepped onto the platform. There, she was already awaited by her favorites, the old grandfather and the old wolf. They greeted Monica every day at the train station where she arrived.